You wake up at dawn on June 6th, 1944. You're 18 years old. You're manning a concrete bunker on the coast of Normandy. For months, your officers have told you the Allies are coming. Today, through the morning mist, you see 5,000 ships on the horizon. The largest invasion force in human history is heading straight for your beach. This is what the Atlantic Wall looked like from the inside. This is what happened when Fortress Europe cracked. The young soldiers holding Hitler's coastal defenses weren't the elite troops you might expect. Most were teenagers, old men, or foreign conscripts. The 709th Static Infantry Division held Omaha Beach, average age 17. Many had never fired a shot in combat. They had been told the concrete would protect them. They had been told reinforcements would come. They had been told many things that turned out to be lies. If you value documented World War II history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from German military archives and survivor testimonies. Now back to the story. Heinrich Severloh was 19 when he woke up in bunker WN-72 overlooking Omaha Beach. He had arrived in Normandy 3 months earlier. His machine gun position commanded a perfect view of the landing zone. At 6:30 in the morning, the naval bombardment began. Shells the size of automobiles screamed overhead. The concrete walls shook. Dust filled his lungs. Through his gun sight, he watched landing craft approach through the smoke. The first wave hit the beach at 6:35. American soldiers stumbled out of their boats into chest-deep water. Severloh opened fire. His MG-42 could fire 1,200 rounds per minute. He had 40,000 rounds stacked beside him. The water turned red within minutes. Bodies floated face down in the surf. More boats kept coming. At Point du Hoc, 40 German soldiers held the clifftop positions. They faced 225 American Rangers climbing straight up 90-foot cliffs. Obergefreiter Franz Gockel watched through his periscope as grappling hooks caught the cliff edge below him. He dropped grenades over the side. The Rangers kept climbing. Hand over hand up ropes slick with blood and seawater. The Germans had spent 4 years building the Atlantic Wall. 15,000 concrete bunkers stretched from Norway to Spain. 6 million mines buried in the sand. Steel obstacles welded to iron posts driven deep into the seafloor. Rommel himself had inspected these beaches in April. He called them impregnable. On June 6th, he was in Germany celebrating his wife's birthday. Franz Gockel's unit at Point du Hoc had 6 casement guns. Each bunker held a 155mm howitzer with a range of 13 miles. These guns could sink ships 12 miles out to sea. When the Rangers finally reached the top of the cliff, they found empty concrete rooms. The guns had been moved inland weeks earlier. Wooden decoys sat in their place. Widerstand's nest. 72 was Heinrich Severloh's bunker number. Resistance Nest 72. The name tells you everything about German defensive doctrine. Every position was designed to hold until death. No retreat orders existed. Ammunition was stacked for days of fighting. Food for a week, water for 3 days. After that, you were expected to be dead. The morning naval bombardment lasted 90 minutes. 15-inch shells from HMS Warspite, 14-inch guns from USS Nevada, rockets from converted landing craft. Over 5,000 tons of high explosive hit the Normandy coast before the first soldier stepped on the beach. Most of it missed the German positions entirely. The concrete bunkers were built into the cliff face. The shells flew overhead and exploded in the fields behind. Private Werner Kortenhaus held position at Widerstand's Nest 76. He was 16 years old, born in Hamburg, drafted 8 months earlier. He had never seen combat. Through his rifle scope, he watched American soldiers crawl across the sand below. Some were wounded, some were dead, some were pretending to be dead. He had orders to shoot anything that moved. The second wave landed at 7:30, the third at 8:15. Each wave brought 600 men in 36 landing craft. The boats had to thread between steel obstacles topped with mines. German artillery had the range marked to every yard of beach. Kortenhaus counted muzzle flashes from the ships offshore. 47 destroyers, 3 battleships, 5 cruisers, all firing at positions like his. At 9:45, USS Doyle steamed to within 800 yards of shore, point-blank range for a destroyer. Her 5-inch guns began systematic destruction of every bunker they could see. Widerstand's Nest 75 took a direct hit. Widerstand's Nest 73 collapsed. Widerstand's Nest 74 went silent, one by one. The resistance nests were blown apart by naval gunfire. Heinrich Severloh fired 12,400 rounds that morning. He later claimed 400 kills, though no record confirms this number. American casualties at Omaha Beach totaled 2,400 men. Most fell in the first 2 hours. Severlow's position held until 1:15 in the afternoon. Then he ran out of ammunition. If you're finding this perspective valuable, hit that subscribe button and let us know your location in the comments. This research comes from first-hand German accounts and Allied intelligence reports. Now back to the horror unfolding on the beaches. Gefreiter Gustav Winter manned an 88mm anti-tank gun at Utah Beach. His crew of 4 had trained together for 18 months. They could load and fire every 20 seconds. Their first target appeared at 0700 hours. An American Sherman tank, hull down behind a dune. Winter's gunner put an armor-piercing shell through its turret at 600 yards. The tank exploded. More tanks kept coming. D.D. Shermans launched from landing craft 2 miles offshore. Amphibious tanks with canvas screens to keep them afloat. Winter's crew destroyed 3 before American infantry overran their position. The final tank fired from 50 yards away. Winter's last sight was a 76mm muzzle flash. The 716th Infantry Regiment held the Omaha Beach sector. 644 men spread across 6 miles of coast. They faced 3 infantry divisions plus armor support. Roughly 35,000 Americans would land at Omaha that day. The math was simple, the outcome inevitable, but the young Germans fought anyway. Obergefreiter Hans Heinze commanded the machine gun nest at Weiterstand's Nest 71. His position overlooked the Vierville Draw, the main exit from Omaha Beach inland. Any American advance had to pass directly below his bunker. Heinze had interlocking fields of fire with 3 other positions, crossfire that could stop a regiment. At 10:30, American engineers reached the base of Heinze's cliff. They carried Bangalore torpedoes, long tubes packed with TNT. The engineers crawled forward under machine gun fire. Some were hit, others kept moving. They shoved the explosives into gaps in the German wire. The blast cleared a path 20 feet wide through the minefield. Heinze watched American soldiers pour through the gap. His MG-42 jammed after the first burst. Dirty ammunition fed too fast. His loader cleared the jam. Took 30 seconds. In that time, a dozen Americans reached the base of his bunker. Grenades came flying through the firing slit. The first one missed, the second did not. Lieutenant Arthur Janka commanded Weiterstand's Nest 5 at Utah Beach. He was 23 years old, a veteran of the Russian front. He had 50 men under his command and 12 machine gun positions. His bunkers faced seaward across 500 yards of open sand. Perfect killing ground if the attackers came straight in. The Americans did not come straight in. They landed a mile south of Junk's position due to strong currents and navigation errors. By the time he realized his mistake, American paratroopers had already landed behind him. The 4th Infantry Division was advancing inland. Junkie was surrounded by 9 in the morning. American casualties at Utah Beach totaled 197 men, lightest losses of any landing zone. This was not because German resistance was weaker. This was because the Americans landed in the wrong place and accidentally avoided the main defensive positions. Sometimes survival comes down to currents and compass errors. Werner Kortenhaus held his rifle position until 11:45. Then American Rangers appeared on the cliff behind him. They had climbed the rocks under covering fire from destroyers offshore. Kortenhaus turned to fire at the Rangers. An American rifle bullet took him in the chest. He was dead before he hit the ground. Age 16 years, 4 months, 12 days. The Atlantic Wall cost 4 billion Reichsmarks to build. 700,000 workers labored for 4 years. Rommel added 500,000 obstacles to the beaches in the final 6 months. Steel hedgehogs, concrete tetrahedra, wooden posts topped with mines. All of it designed to stop landing craft at low tide. The Allies landed at high tide and sailed right over the obstacles. Heinrich Severlow abandoned his position at 13:15 hours. He had no ammunition left, no orders, no contact with his command post. American soldiers were climbing the cliff below his bunker. He threw his machine gun into a crater and ran inland. He would spend the rest of the war in hiding. He survived to be 94 years old. Gustav Winter's anti-tank gun position was overrun at 07:45. Hans Heinze's machine gun nest fell at 10:53. Arthur Janke's command post was destroyed at 11:20. Werner Kortenhaus was killed at 11:45. One by one, the Atlantic Wall cracked, not from overwhelming force, but from simple mathematics. Too few defenders spread too thin across too much coastline. The German commanders had predicted this exact scenario. General Guderian warned Hitler in 1943 that static defenses would fail against a determined attack. Rommel argued for mobile reserves positioned inland. Hitler insisted on fortress walls, fixed positions, no retreat. Fight where you stand until you die. By midnight on June 6th, 155,000 Allied soldiers had landed in Normandy. German defenders killed or wounded 10,000 of them. But 39 German strongpoints had fallen, 42 machine gun nests destroyed, 15 artillery positions silenced. The Atlantic Wall had held for exactly 18 hours. By 1800 hours, the first German counterattacks began. Kampfgruppe Meyer rolled toward Omaha Beach with 21 Panzer IV tanks and 800 infantry. They had been held in reserve 12 miles inland. Hitler's standing orders required his personal approval for any tank movement. That approval came 6 hours too late. Oberst Kurt Meyer commanded the counterattack. He was 33 years old, a veteran of Poland, France, and Russia. He reached the coastal road at 19:30 hours. Through his binoculars, he could see American supply dumps already growing on the beach, trucks unloading ammunition, field hospitals treating wounded. The beachhead was already 3 miles deep. Meyer's tanks advanced in column formation down the coastal highway. American naval observers spotted them immediately. USS Arkansas opened fire from 8 miles offshore. Her 12-inch guns could punch through 2 feet of steel armor. The first salvo landed 50 yards short. The second salvo was dead on target. 3 German tanks exploded simultaneously. The surviving panzers scattered into the Bocage countryside. Normandy hedgerows that had been defensive barriers now became tank traps. American Thunderbolt fighters appeared overhead. They carried 500-pound bombs and armor-piercing rockets. Meyer watched his counterattack dissolve under air attack within 20 minutes. Hauptmann Hans von Luck commanded the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment. His orders came directly from Rommel's headquarters at La Roche-Guyon. Retake Sword Beach, drive the British back into the sea, use whatever force necessary. Von Luck had 900 men and 18 self-propelled guns. The British had landed 15,000 troops at Sword Beach that morning. Von Luck's advance began at 2100 hours. His lead elements reached the village of Benouville at 2230. There they encountered British paratroopers who had captured the canal bridges before dawn. The 601st Parachute Battalion, 180 men armed with anti-tank weapons and fanatical determination. The battle for Benouville lasted 3 hours. Von Luck's assault guns fired high explosive shells into stone houses where British paratroopers sheltered. The paratroopers replied with Piat anti-tank rockets, close-range urban warfare where survival measured in seconds. By midnight, Von Luck had lost 6 assault guns and 200 men. The bridges remained in British hands. General Major Wilhelm Richter commanded the 716th Infantry Division defending Omaha Beach. He had been in Normandy since February 1943. 15 months to prepare his defenses. 15 months to train his men. 15 months to wait for an attack everyone knew was coming, but nobody could predict exactly when or where. Richter's command post sat 2 miles inland in the village of Bayeux. He lost contact with his forward bunkers at 0800 hours. American jamming knocked out his radio network. Field telephone lines cut by naval bombardment. Signal flares obscured by smoke and dust. By 1000 hours, Richter was commanding blind. He had no idea what was happening on his own beaches. The German reserves that might have made a difference were scattered across France. The 2nd Panzer Division sat near Amiens, 200 miles away. The 116th Panzer Division was refitting near Paris. The Panzerlehr Division remained south of the Loire River on Hitler's direct orders. Not one tank division was positioned within 50 miles of the Normandy coast. Obergefreiter Johann Voss manned an anti-aircraft gun at Pointe du Hoc. His crew operated a quadruple 20mm cannon designed to shoot down Allied bombers. On June 6th, they used it against American Rangers climbing the cliffs below. The gun could fire 1,800 rounds per minute. At point-blank range, it turned human bodies into red mist. Voss's position held until 1300 hours. Then American naval gunfire found his exact coordinates. The destroyer, USS Satterlee, put 14 5-inch shells into his gun pit in 30 seconds, direct hits from 1,200 yards offshore. Voss was 19 years old when he died. His body was never recovered from the crater. Lieutenant Helmut Liebeskind commanded the artillery observation post overlooking Gold Beach. His job was to direct fire from the batteries inland. 4 155mm howitzers with a range of 15 miles. Each gun could fire 4 shells per minute. Liebeskind had preset firing coordinates for every yard of beach below his position. At 0730, British landing craft approached through the morning mist. Liebeskind called fire missions to his batteries. The first shells landed in the surf among the approaching boats. Direct hits on 2 landing craft. 60 British soldiers killed before they reached the beach. More boats kept coming through the shell fire. American counter-battery fire found Liebeskind's position at 0945. His observation post took a direct hit from a 105mm howitzer. The shell penetrated 3 feet of reinforced concrete and exploded inside the bunker. Liebeskind and his 2 radio operators were killed instantly. The artillery batteries fell silent without his direction. Gefreiter Klaus Bargston served as a medic with the 709th Infantry Division. He was 20 years old, trained for 6 months in battlefield medicine. His aid station sat in a concrete bunker 500 yards behind Omaha Beach. On June 6th, Wounded Germans began arriving at 700 hours. They never stopped coming. Barkston treated machine gun wounds, artillery fragments, burns from naval shells. His supplies ran out by noon, morphine gone, bandages exhausted, sulfa powder used up. He started tearing up his own uniform for makeshift dressings. American wounded began arriving mixed with German casualties. Enemy soldiers bleeding the same red blood. At 1500 hours, American infantry overran Barkston's aid station. They found him treating a wounded GI with a sucking chest wound. The Americans held their fire. Barkston finished bandaging the American soldier. Then he surrendered. He spent the rest of the war in a prisoner camp in Texas. He survived to become a doctor in post-war Germany. The 15th Army held the Pas de Calais, 100 miles northeast of Normandy. General von Salmuth commanded 22 divisions, including 4 panzer divisions, the strongest German force in Western Europe. They sat motionless all day on June 6th, waiting for the real invasion that never came. Hitler still believed Normandy was a diversion. Hauptmann Friedrich Lang commanded a company of the 352nd Infantry Division at Utah Beach. His men were mostly foreign volunteers, Russians who chose German uniforms over Soviet prison camps, Poles conscripted from occupied territories, Czechs who joined for regular meals. They had little reason to die for Hitler's Reich. When American paratroopers surrounded Lang's position, his foreign soldiers began deserting in groups. Russians threw down their weapons and walked toward American lines with hands raised. Poles stripped off German uniforms and claimed to be forced laborers. Czechs spoke broken English and begged for cigarettes. By noon, Lang commanded 30 men instead of 160. The Atlantic Wall's greatest weakness was not its concrete and steel. It was the men inside the bunkers, teenagers drafted from defeated countries, old men pulled from factory jobs. Wounded veterans no longer fit for the Russian front. They had been told they were defending Europe from invasion. Most could not remember why that mattered. Oberst Ludwig Krug commanded the 919th Grenadier Regiment at Sword Beach. He was 52 years old. A veteran of the First World War, he had lost 3 sons on the Russian front. His regiment averaged 41 years old, the oldest unit in Normandy. They called themselves the Stomach Battalion because half suffered from ulcers and other digestive problems. Krug's men fought with the desperation of fathers protecting their families. They knew Germany was losing the war. They knew this invasion meant the end was near, but they also knew Soviet armies were advancing from the east. Surrender to the Western Allies meant prisoner camps and eventual repatriation. Surrender to Stalin meant death. The regiment held their coastal positions until 1600 hours. Then British Cromwell tanks broke through near Ustrim. Krug ordered a fighting withdrawal to secondary positions inland. His men moved in small groups through the bocage. By nightfall, 2/3 of his regiment had been killed or captured. Krug died leading a counterattack near Caen 3 days later. General Oberst Friedrich Dollmann commanded Army Group B, defending the entire Atlantic coast. He had 16 divisions spread from Holland to the Loire River, 600 miles of coastline with gaps everywhere. Dollmann knew his positions could not stop a determined invasion. He had told this to Rommel repeatedly. Rommel agreed but could not convince Hitler. On June 6th, Dollmann was attending a war game exercise in Rennes, 150 miles from the invasion beaches. The exercise scenario was defending against an Allied landing in Normandy. The irony was not lost on anyone. While German generals played war games about defending Normandy, Allied soldiers were actually capturing it. Dollmann raced back to his headquarters at Saint-Germain-en-Laye near Paris. He arrived at 2200 hours to find his coastal divisions shattered. 40% casualties in the first day. No reserves available, air support non-existent, naval support limited to a few destroyers and torpedo boats. The Atlantic Wall had become a death trap for his own men. The psychological impact hit German defenders harder than the physical bombardment. These young soldiers had been told they were part of an impregnable fortress. They had spent months digging positions and laying mines. They believed their concrete bunkers could withstand any attack. When Allied naval gunfire began punching through 3-foot-thick walls, their confidence shattered. Private Werner Schmidt manned a mortar position behind Gold Beach. He was 17 years old, conscripted 4 months earlier from a farm in Bavaria. His mortar crew had practiced firing at coordinates marked on maps. On June 6th, those map coordinates filled with British soldiers advancing inland. Schmidt's first shot at living targets. The British advance reached Schmidt's position at 1400 hours. His mortar had fired 67 rounds, high explosive shells that burst among British infantry advancing across open fields. Schmidt watched through binoculars as his shells found their targets, men throwing themselves flat, medics running toward the wounded, officers waving their units forward. A British sniper found Schmidt's position at 1430 hours. One bullet through his telescope sight. The bullet passed through the scope and into Schmidt's right eye. He died instantly, still holding the mortar sight to his face. His body was found 3 days later by British burial parties. His final entry in his diary read, "Mama, I am scared." The final German reserves committed to battle were the Hitler Youth formations, 16 and 17-year-old volunteers from the Nazi Party youth organizations. They had trained with wooden rifles and practiced throwing potato masher grenades. On June 6th, they carried real weapons and faced veteran Allied soldiers with 3 years of combat experience. The 12th SS Panzer Division Hitler Youth moved toward the invasion beaches on the afternoon of June 7th. Their tanks were newer than most German armor. Their training was thorough by Nazi standards. Their commitment was fanatical. Their average age was 17 years and 4 months. They advanced singing Nazi party songs. American Thunderbolt fighters caught the Hitler Youth column on the road near Caen. Rockets and cannon fire destroyed 16 tanks in the first attack. The surviving tanks scattered into the countryside. Young SS soldiers abandoned their vehicles and tried to reach their lines on foot. Most were killed or captured within 24 hours. Fanaticism could not stop high explosive shells. The final irony came to light only after the war ended. Allied intelligence found construction records for Widerstands Nest 72 in a bombed archive in Berlin. Heinrich Severlow's bunker, the position that inflicted the heaviest casualties at Omaha Beach, was built by French forced laborers in 1943. The concrete mixer's serial number traced back to a factory in Lyon. French workers had built the bunker that killed American soldiers. German teenagers died defending it. Russian conscripts manned positions they did not believe in. Polish forced laborers had welded the steel obstacles on the beaches. Everyone was trapped by the same machine. Everyone suffered for decisions made by men who never came within 100 miles of the fighting. In 2009, construction crews expanding a parking lot near Colleville-sur-Mer discovered a mass grave. 43 German soldiers buried in a hastily dug trench. Most were teenagers. Dog tags identify them as members of the 716th Infantry Division. They had been buried by American Graves Registration Units on June 8, 1944. The bodies were never claimed. The grave was never marked. They had defended Hitler's Atlantic Wall and died as forgotten as the concrete bunkers they once manned.